In 2023, people conquered the universe with giant and modern spacecraft. They also met many different species. Together with them, they created an organization called the Universe Federation to maintain order and protect the planets throughout the galaxies. At the beginning of the movie, a spaceship of the Universe Federation was close to an electrical storm. The gravity there was very unstable, making it difficult for the crew to control the ship. Surprisingly, from the storm emerged a giant black spaceship with sharp legs like hundreds of swords. Immediately, the other monster ship locked on to the Federation ship's position, then launched an unknown torpedo at them. The torpedo separated into hundreds of fragments, heading straight toward the Federation ship. The crew could not avoid it, so the ship was seriously damaged. The engines broke, and the ship's compartments were immediately damaged. As they were about to be destroyed, the screen suddenly activated, connecting to the commander of the monster ship, named Nero. He asked the captain of the Federation ship to come to their ship. With no other choice, he transferred command to his deputy, named Ket. Then he boarded their ship to negotiate. Nero asked about the current date and for information about Ambassador Spock, but the captain did not know of this person. Upon hearing the current date was April 2233, Nero immediately killed the captain. As soon as the captain was dead, the battle broke out again. They had much more modern equipment and continued attacking. Meanwhile, Ket's wife was pregnant and their son was about to be born. Then Ket ordered everyone to evacuate using small ships. Although Ket really wanted to be with his wife, the ship was severely damaged. The automatic steering system was broken. He piloted the ship alone to shoot down the missiles chasing them. Then he drove the spacecraft toward the enemy ship. In his final moments, he only gave his son a name, Jim. The two ships then collided with each other and the crew escaped. A few years later on Earth, Jim was a boy and was very mischievous. He took his grandfather's car onto the road and was chased by the police. Meanwhile, on the planet Vulcan, another boy named Spock was taking extremely difficult Vulcan tests. Spock was strictly raised, disciplined, and had a deep understanding in all areas. Although he was Vulcan, he had a mother who was from Earth. Therefore, Spock still had human-like emotions. But this caused Spock to be frequently despised by other Vulcan people. Many years later, Spock had grown up and become an excellent officer. He broke the record for the extremely difficult Vulcan exam. However, when preparing to be admitted to the Vulcan Science Academy, they once again mentioned Spock's human heritage. Finally, Spock declined and chose to join the Universe Federation to explore space. Jim was in a bar on Earth, flirting with a girl named Uhura. However, Uhura did not pay attention to him. Then Jim's aggressive attitude made Uhura's friends uncomfortable. Jim also challenged them, and soon they rushed into a fight. Due to being outnumbered, Jim was beaten by them. Then Captain Pike entered and stopped them. Pike was an old friend of Ket. Jim's father sacrificed himself, blocking the black monster ship and saving more than 800 people. Pike had always watched Jim since he was young and was impressed by Jim's skills. However, Jim was only busy playing and not focusing on space exploration. That day, Pike came to ask Jim to join the Universe Federation. Moved by the words about his father, Jim finally agreed, and the next morning, he boarded the transport to become a Federation student. There, Jim also met a man named McCoy, who was studying to be a doctor. 3 years later, the giant black ship remained intact after the previous incident. Nero and his crew had hidden for 25 years, waiting for this day. Then another electrical storm suddenly appeared, and a ship emerged from it. Nero immediately stopped it. Meanwhile, at the Federation Academy, Jim, McCoy, and Uhura were taking a very difficult combat simulation test that no student had ever passed. However, at the beginning of the test, as captain, Jim surprised everyone with a very relaxed and confident manner, making the supervisors suspect whether he was taking it seriously. But he showed the qualities of an excellent commander. Jim exploited a flaw in this simulation and passed the test. The test was designed by the genius Spock. Later, Jim had to appear before a Federation tribunal as he and Spock argued about who was right. The Admiral suddenly received an emergency distress call from the planet Vulcan. The main fleet was engaged in another sector. Students would be able to participate directly. Everyone quickly boarded small spacecraft. Jim was barred from going due to suspension. McCoy found Jim left behind, so he injected him with a dose of medicine, causing Jim to exhibit symptoms, allowing him to board for treatment. After that, they were taken to a space station in orbit, a docking point for giant ships. Jim's ship was the Enterprise, and its captain was Pike. The ship accelerated to warp speed and jumped toward the planet Vulcan. But due to a technical error by the new pilot Sulu, who was inexperienced, the Enterprise executed slower warp travel than other ships. After identifying the problem, the crew initiated the warp travel, arriving at Vulcan within 3 minutes. At this time, Uhura received news of an electrical storm. Jim realized with alarm that this matched a serious past incident and rushed to inform Captain Pike. The event on Vulcan wasn't a natural disaster. They were under attack. The electrical storm phenomenon was identical to what occurred 25 years ago on the day Jim was born. Earlier, the Federation had also received news that a giant ship from the Romulan Empire had destroyed 47 Federation ships near that planet. Connecting the events, Jim concluded they were rushing into the enemy's trap. When Pike told Uhura to contact the other ships, there was no response. Captain Pike raised shields and ordered battle stations. As soon as they exited warp, a horrific scene appeared before them. Wreckage of Federation ships drifted in space. They had to avoid debris while above Vulcan. A device from Nero's ship drilled a deep hole into the planet's core, blocking all communication and preventing Federation ships from warping. Then they saw Nero's huge black ship. Nero recognized them and fired missiles. Immediately, the Enterprise was struck by a torpedo. As the Enterprise faced destruction, Nero recognized the ship and demanded to speak to Spock. Nero ordered Spock to prepare something, but Spock did not recognize him. Then, a familiar melody played as Nero ordered Captain Pike to come aboard. Facing overwhelming force, Pike had no choice. He also ordered Jim, Sulu, and another officer to accompany him. While Sulu remained on the Enterprise, Pike would drop them off to destroy the drilling device. He transferred command to Spock and promoted Jim to first officer. Later, as their shuttle approached Nero's ship, the three jumped through space toward the drill platform. To avoid detection, they jumped at the last moment. One died, leaving Jim and Sulu. At that moment, two enemies spotted them. They fought, and thanks to Sulu's swordsmanship, they defeated them, then used weapons to destroy the drill. Meanwhile, Nero extracted red matter. Although their drill was destroyed, it had reached the planet's core. Nero released red matter into the core. The red matter was capable of creating a black hole that would swallow Vulcan. The drill retracted as Nero's ship prepared to leave, causing Sulu and Jim to fall from the platform. Fortunately, Uhura managed to lock on to the coordinates and successfully beamed them to the Enterprise. Spock had gone to Vulcan to evacuate his family, but unfortunately, a ground collapse caused his mother to fall, preventing her transport. Spock returned to the ship and watched helplessly as the planet was swallowed by the black hole with nearly 6 billion Vulcans. Only about 10,000 Vulcans survived. Later on Nero's ship, he demanded Pike provide Earth's defense shield frequency. Nero wanted vengeance for his family and his Romulan homeworld. In his time, his planet would be destroyed by a supernova, but the Federation abandoned them, a failure Spock was responsible for. Now he would destroy all Federation worlds, first Vulcan, next Earth. Naturally, Pike would die without revealing the frequency. But Nero forced the information by placing a creature in his mouth that injected poison to torture Pike. Meanwhile, on the Enterprise, Spock and Jim were arguing. Spock wanted to retreat for reinforcements and attack later, but Jim insisted they had no time. They had to pursue Nero to save Earth and rescue Pike. As captain, Spock ejected Jim from the ship onto a planet. After landing near a Federation outpost, Jim was chased by a large white monster. When he thought he was safe, a larger monster appeared and continued hunting him. Running into an ice cave, Jim was rescued by a stranger. Jim grew suspicious when the man revealed he was Spock from the future. Nero had stranded him here to witness Vulcan's destruction. Spock was stunned to learn Jim wasn't the Enterprise captain. He performed a mind meld with Jim and showed why he was sent to the past. 129 years later, a supernova would destroy the star near Romulus. Spock was tasked with using red matter to create a black hole to contain it. But he arrived late. Romulus was gone. After Spock deployed the red matter, Nero's ship attacked Spock's vessel. Both were pulled into the black hole. Nero emerged 25 years before Jim's birth. He waited for future Spock to retrieve the remaining red matter. Spock apologized to Jim. Had Nero not come, the timeline would have been unchanged, and Jim's father would be alive. Putting aside grief, Jim focused on stopping Nero. He and Spock went to a Federation facility there. They met a man named Scott, an engineering genius. Spock knew of his inventions. Scott had built a transporter not just for 100 miles, but for planetary distances. Spock broke protocol, revealing future equations so Scott could beam Jim to the Enterprise. Spock wouldn't accompany Jim, letting him and young Spock save Earth. This was their future. He urged Jim to claim the captain's position without revealing his existence. Only Jim could stop Nero. Later on the Enterprise, they were at warp when Spock discovered Scott and Jim had boarded. Before Spock could question them, Jim provoked him about Vulcan's destruction and his mother's death. Spock lost control and attacked Jim. When officers intervened, Spock realized his emotional compromise and resigned command. As first officer, Jim assumed command. Jim ordered pursuit of Nero's ship. Uhura devised a stealth approach using Saturn's magnetic field to hide from sensors. It would mask Enterprise from enemy scans. They maneuvered toward Saturn. Spock regained composure and rejoined duty. Meanwhile, Nero approached Earth. He deployed the drill. Meanwhile, Enterprise reached Saturn's rings. Scott beamed Jim and Spock aboard Nero's ship. Unexpectedly, they materialized in Nero's chamber and were spotted. A fight ensued. Spock performed a mind meld on a guard, locating Pike and the drill's position. The drill activated, disrupting transporters and communications. Meanwhile, Jim and Spock reached future Spock's ship. It recognized Spock and allowed him to pilot it. Though confused, they prioritized rescuing Pike. Jim took the ship toward Nero's vessel while Spock continued searching. In the control room, Jim was captured to distract Nero. Simultaneously, Spock flew to the drill and destroyed it. Enraged, Nero fired missiles at Spock. Spock warped away to evade. Nero launched fighters. Spock stopped and returned, firing missiles at them. Suddenly, Enterprise arrived and destroyed the missiles. Jim reached Pike and rescued him. Then, Spock rammed his ship into Nero's. Before impact, Scott beamed all three out as red matter spilled, creating a black hole that consumed Nero's ship. The black hole's gravity began pulling Enterprise in. Scott ejected the warp core into the hole, causing an explosion that pushed them free. The crisis ended. Later on Earth, Spock met his future self, who avoided discussing timelines. He assured Spock Vulcans would find a new home, while Jim and the Enterprise crew would continue exploring. At Jim's promotion ceremony, he officially became Enterprise captain, fulfilling his father's legacy. Later, Jim, Spock, and crew departed on the Enterprise to explore the universe. Part 2 begins a year later. Enterprise was on a mission to observe a primitive civilization. They were on a planet with primitive inhabitants. The locals were primitive tribes. A volcano was about to erupt. Jim had to steal a sacred artifact that they worshipped to lead them to safety. Meanwhile, Spock descended into the volcano to plant a device to prevent an eruption. High temperatures overwhelmed Spock, but he grabbed a rock ledge. After escaping pursuers, Jim and McCoy reached the coast and beamed to Enterprise. The ship was submerged to avoid detection. Federation law forbade revealing advanced technology to preserve cultural development. Spock prepared to sacrifice himself rather than violate protocol. However, Jim and Uhura protested. Spock, upholding Vulcan principles, accepted death and severed communications. As the volcano erupted and the device detonated, Enterprise surfaced. It rescued Spock seconds before the device detonated. Although they saved Spock, they revealed the Enterprise. The inhabitants knelt as if witnessing gods. Now they had a new object of worship. Back on Earth, Pike summoned Jim and Spock. True to Vulcan ethics, Spock reported the incident. They expected leniency, but revealing the ship had violated Federation law. Jim faced a tribunal, and Enterprise was impounded. Meanwhile, in London, a man visited his daughter in the hospital. She had a terminal illness. A man named Harrison had promised to cure her in exchange for a mission. Harrison sent a box containing serum and a ring. After the serum injection, his daughter recovered. When she was well, the man, an archive employee, took Harrison's ring to work. He placed it in water, triggering a chemical reaction that caused a massive explosion, destroying the archive. Jim was demoralized when Pike visited. Pike had petitioned for leniency based on Jim's service. Pike regained command of Enterprise and reinstated Jim as first officer. Spock would transfer to another ship. Jim was moved. Suddenly, an emergency alert sounded. They rushed to headquarters. Spock was present. Admiral Marcus reported that Harrison had claimed responsibility for the attack, stating he had been coerced. Harrison was a Starfleet officer. Jim noticed something odd. Why attack an archive when data is public? He sensed this was just the beginning. An attack on this meeting would be strategic. As Jim spoke, a small ship appeared, firing energy weapons at them. Security forces responded, but the ship's shields repelled standard weapons. Meanwhile, Jim spotted a weakness and jammed a fire hose into its engine. The ship exploded, but Harrison escaped. Jim couldn't prevent his warp jump. The attack killed many officers, including Pike. Jim witnessed this. Scott traced Harrison to a planet. Jim asked Admiral Marcus to authorize pursuit, but the planet was in Klingon territory. Relations were hostile. Previously, Klingons annexed Federation planets and destroyed ships. Many Starfleet personnel died. The London archive had been secretly used to develop advanced weapons. Marcus suspected Harrison had aided the Klingons. Harrison's location was remote. Marcus ordered Enterprise to deploy stealth missiles that could strike undetected by Klingons. Marcus also restored Jim and Spock's ranks. While boarding, Spock opposed the missile strike since Federation law prohibits execution without trial. Attacking Klingon territory violated treaties and ethics. Jim ignored Spock's warning. A science officer named Carol boarded, appointed by Marcus to oversee the missiles. On Enterprise, Scott refused the missiles when guards denied him access to inspect them. He warned that this endangered the warp core. Jim overruled Scott, who resigned. Jim appointed Chekhov as chief engineer and departed. Meanwhile, Spock investigated Carol. In fact, she did not have to be sent here. Additionally, Carol is Marcus's daughter. At the same time, the Enterprise was performing a warp jump and preparing to arrive. Suddenly, the warp core had a problem, causing the ship to stop. It would take 2 hours for Scotty to repair the engine. Despite having sufficient range, Jim finally listened to Spock and decided to lead a team down. He, Spock, and Uhura boarded a shuttlecraft. Sulu was assigned to command the ship. At the same time, Sulu also warned John to surrender. The shuttle would be shot down there. Below, when they just entered the atmosphere, they did not expect the Klingons to have a patrol team there. Klingon spacecraft constantly chased them because their shuttle was equipped only for exploration and had limited weapons. So Jim piloted the ship continuously through narrow structures to lose the pursuing enemy. But in the end, they were still surrounded due to the overwhelming numbers. There was no other way. Uhura went out to negotiate because she was the only one who understood the Klingon language. However, the Klingons did not want to negotiate and directly attacked Uhura. At that moment, a mysterious person appeared and attacked the Klingons, helping Uhura escape. Jim and Spock also rushed in, shooting at the Klingons. More Klingon troops were sent to arrest them, but the mysterious person defeated them all. At this time, everyone was surprised when that person was John. After defeating all the enemies, he surrendered unconditionally. John was motivated to surrender by the threat of the 72 missiles being launched. Jim immediately took him into custody to take revenge for Pike, but John was not in any condition to fight and ignored Jim. Then, Jim reported to Uhura that the Federation had captured John. McCoy was impressed with John's power and strength, so he also took his blood for analysis. Suddenly, John told Jim that if he didn't listen to him, all the Enterprise crew would be killed. John even knew about the damaged warp core. Jim tried to access the new generation missile and check a location near Konos. Faced with John's threats, finally, Jim sent Carol and McCoy to a planet. At the same time, he called Scotty on Earth and asked him to check another place. A few hours later, Carol and McCoy went to the missile's location and carefully opened it. Surprisingly, the missile also had a self-destruct mode that would activate if anyone tried to open it. Fortunately, Carol disabled it, and when they looked inside, both were surprised to find a human inside. Meanwhile, Scotty also approached Konos. There was a secret base hidden there. Scotty followed other ships to enter the base. Back on the Enterprise, the two of them reported that the technology in the missile was not modern, but ancient. It was Federation hibernation technology, no longer used after the invention of warp drive. Now only John knew the truth. Actually, John's real name was Khan. It was Khan who had put his crew into hibernation in the torpedoes. They were the remnants of a genetic enhancement program that had created superhuman soldiers to fight during the eugenics wars. But in peacetime, they were considered too dangerous, convicted as criminals, and then launched into space. After the Federation found Khan's spacecraft, only he was awakened, and the name John was created by Admiral Marcus to hide his identity. Khan's intelligence and brutality helped Marcus create advanced spacecraft and weapons for the war with the Klingons. The fact that they were trapped there was also Marcus's plan. If the Enterprise were attacked by the Klingons, it would be an excuse for total war to break out, as Marcus desired. Khan said that his beloved teammates were used by Marcus to control him, so he did everything to get revenge on him. And Pike's death was just an unfortunate accident. Suddenly, Jim was alerted by Sulu about a strange ship approaching them, but it was not from the Klingons. Jim immediately told everyone to raise shields. Then a giant black ship twice as big as the Enterprise warped in. The main contact was Admiral Marcus. He expressed disappointment that Jim had not been killed and that Khan had only been captured. Knowing that Jim had found the truth, Marcus admitted everything. He also felt it was wrong to awaken Khan. Many people had to sacrifice. Because of Marcus, Khan and his crew were dangerous people. They had committed many war crimes. They were not saints. Now, Marcus demanded Jim hand over Khan and the 72 crew members, otherwise he would attack. There was no other way. Jim pretended to accept Marcus's demand. Then Scotty reported that the warp drive was repaired. Jim immediately had Sulu initiate a warp jump back to Earth. But when they thought they were safe at warp speed, Marcus's ship suddenly appeared behind them and attacked the Enterprise. The attack caused the Enterprise to be seriously damaged. Marcus's ship had been improved and was 3 times faster than the Enterprise. At this moment, Carol came out and told Jim to let her talk to her father. Marcus finally stopped firing, but Carol was immediately beamed to Marcus's ship. When the energy weapon was about to fire, the power source was suddenly interrupted. It turned out Scotty was aboard Marcus's ship. After that, Jim went to Khan and suggested that Khan fly with him to Marcus's ship, since Khan had designed it. In the meantime, McCoy continued to actively study Khan's blood. He was surprised at its regenerative ability, so he tried injecting it into a dead animal. Khan told Scotty that he would try to open the door of a cargo bay. Then the two of them were on the hull and were pushed into space, with debris all around. While the two of them struggled in space, Scotty managed to distract a guard and open the door, and then they got in just in time. Meanwhile, Spock felt something was wrong. He contacted the future Spock to ask about Khan, although the older Spock had never revealed details about the future, because revealing it could change fate. But unlike the young Spock, for the older Spock, not everything must follow strict logic. So he revealed that Khan was the most dangerous enemy that Spock had ever confronted. Spock then had the crew transfer the 72 torpedoes and prepare them for launch. On Marcus's ship, due to the power of his genetic enhancement, Khan easily defeated Marcus's guards. The 3 captured the commander. At this time, Jim signaled Scotty to stun Khan. But unexpectedly, Khan's regenerative ability was too strong. He jumped up and overpowered Scotty and Jim, followed by Carol. Then he rushed to Marcus and killed him with his bare hands. After that, Khan contacted the Enterprise to exchange the 72 crew members for the 3 of them. Spock also couldn't resist, since Khan now controlled a modern warship. He had no choice but to trust Khan and sent over the 72 torpedoes. Khan also returned Carol. However, he then turned his weapons to destroy them and the Enterprise crew. Immediately, Khan locked on target and fired. However, Khan did not expect Spock to have anticipated this. Spock had the crew remove the hibernating people and activated the detonator in the torpedoes. Immediately, Khan's ship was destroyed. Meanwhile, the warp core, due to being attacked, was knocked out of position. The Enterprise was now uncontrolled and was pulled by Earth's gravity. On the other side, Jim also learned what happened. Scotty came to the engineering room. Then they only had one way to fix the warp core, but there was no time. Jim immediately knocked Scotty out and decided to go in himself. With no protective suit and despite being affected by radiation, Jim used all his effort to realign the core. Then the Enterprise was repowered. Spock was informed and ran to the reactor room. He helplessly watched Jim die. On the other side, no one expected Khan to survive. He was trying to crash the black ship into Starfleet headquarters. If it crashed, it would completely destroy the base, causing huge damage. Spock certainly would not let that happen. He had Sulu monitor the position, then transported down to pursue Khan. On the bridge, everyone was sad. Suddenly, the creature that McCoy had injected with Khan's serum revived. Meanwhile, Spock had caught up to Khan. However, Khan was a super soldier. Spock was overpowered by him. Fortunately, Uhura arrived to support. Together, they overpowered and defeated Khan. Spock was now furious and unable to control himself, until Uhura announced that Jim could still be saved. Spock stopped. 2 weeks later, Jim was healthy again thanks to Khan's blood, and Khan was placed back into hibernation with his crew. A memorial also took place. There had been too many losses and sacrifices, but they would never give up the exploration of space and the search for new worlds. Now, the Enterprise and its crew would continue their 5-year mission, and a new journey began. At the beginning of Part 3, the Enterprise was in orbit around a planet. Jim represented the Federation to negotiate peace with the Teslans. He presented them a gift from the Federation Council as a gesture of peace, but the Teslans did not want peace, and they attacked Jim. Scotty had to beam Jim back to the ship. The task of establishing a treaty with the Teslans failed. That day was the 966th day of the Enterprise's 5-year deep space mission. Although the work was difficult, the crew still sacrificed personal comfort to perform their duty. They continued to search for civilizations in the universe to establish diplomatic relations, but it seemed that the long mission duration had made Jim feel depressed and disoriented. Jim further questioned whether they were trying to achieve something in this endless universe. The Enterprise would then go to Starbase Yorktown, the most modern starbase of the Federation, to resupply. This was also an opportunity for everyone to rest and see their families again. During this time, Spock and Uhura also reflected on their relationship. He gave her his mother's necklace, and Uhura wanted a commitment. After that, Spock suddenly received sad news from New Vulcan. Ambassador Spock had died of old age. Then, Spock considered whether to continue serving in Starfleet or return to help the remaining Vulcan people. Meanwhile, in deep space, an unknown flying object was moving towards the starbase. The starbase detected a distress signal from a Federation officer. Jim was immediately briefed. Her name was Kalara, and her ship was trapped on a planet in the Necro Cloud Nebula. Scans by the Admiral also detected a ship there. At that time, the Enterprise was the only ship that could enter there, and Jim had accepted this mission. The Admiral also announced that the Federation Council had approved her request to promote Jim to Vice Admiral. This would also be his last mission commanding the Enterprise. But was that the right path for Jim? He could tell her his decision later. Then Jim and Spock met in the turbolift. Both had things they wanted to say about their upcoming plans. However, since this was their last mission together, they would discuss it after this task was completed. Then the Enterprise quickly set out for the nebula. They slowly navigated the debris field. When they entered this area, they would lose contact with the starbase. The crew would have to perform the task on their own without assistance. Everything seemed calm, and they saw the planet where the ship crashed. Suddenly, Chekhov discovered that a strange ship was approaching. The opponent did not respond to hails. They even jammed communication signals. When they looked more carefully, they were surprised to see it was thousands of small ships. They immediately swarmed and poured towards the Enterprise. The Enterprise was not equipped with weapons for this type of attack. The attackers targeted the warp nacelles to prevent escape. The Enterprise's hull had been breached. The crew then armed themselves against the mysterious invaders. Their commander named Krall boarded the ship and went to the artifact storage. It turned out what they wanted was the ancient weapon of the Abernath people from the beginning of the film. Spock, on the other side, also saw this. Then he was attacked and had to run away. Elsewhere, McCoy went to investigate and discovered that crew members had their life force drained, leaving withered corpses. Jim, alerted by Spock, confronted them and managed to steal the artifact from Krall. In the engineering room, the remaining impulse engines were started. Sulu piloted the ship towards the planet. But immediately, Krall ordered his troops to split the ship in half. There was no other way. Jim ordered everyone to evacuate, and he gave a piece of the artifact to a crewman. The Enterprise crew entered the escape pods, but when they launched, they were captured by Krall's forces. McCoy and Spock were also trapped in a turbolift and ejected into space. They were captured when two fighters grabbed their life pod. Scotty showed ingenuity by hiding in a missile casing, allowing him to escape to the planet. When Krall chased Jim's group, they only had the box. Jim separated the artifact from it. He ran to rescue Sulu and Chekhov. Although they would likely be captured, he still sent them to the life pods to save their lives. After everyone was gone, Jim separated from them and looked on heartbroken at the Enterprise. After landing, Jim angrily confronted Kalara. Clearly she had known they would be attacked, but did not warn them. Kalara explained that she had been forced because her crew was in Krall's hands. Now they would find the Enterprise wreckage to scan the crew's location. At Krall's base, everyone was still alive and had been brought there. Uhura wondered why an alien in a strange place like this knew human language and even knew about the Enterprise. Elsewhere, Spock and McCoy also landed on the planet, but Spock was seriously injured. Fortunately, McCoy was with him, so his life was not in danger. Spock had landed on a cliff and almost fell. He walked for a while and was surrounded by a hostile group. Suddenly, a girl named Jayla appeared and protected Spock. She used a reflective camouflage device and easily chased them away. Jayla also knew English. She helped Spock because of the Starfleet badge he wore. Jayla recounted that the people on this planet were attacked by Krall and stranded here. Since Spock was an engineer, Jayla took him to her home. It turned out that her home was an old Federation ship named the USS Franklin. Meanwhile, Jim's group found the Enterprise wreckage. He pretended to lead Kalara to the artifact's location. Immediately, she showed her true face and attacked Jim. However, Chekhov was behind her. The two fled when her soldiers arrived. Then, Jim activated the thrusters of the Enterprise wreckage, causing it to overturn and crush Kalara. The next morning, Jim and Chekhov were looking for a way to Krall's base when Jim suddenly stepped into a trap. Fortunately, it was Jayla's trap, and she reunited with them. The four of them then returned to the Franklin. The Franklin had been lost over 100 years earlier. Its captain was Edison, one of Starfleet's heroes of early space exploration. There was also an ancient motorcycle aboard. The Franklin had been outfitted by Jayla with a holographic camouflage system covering the whole ship. It was a common technology in her homeland. Using the devices available on the Franklin, Chekhov suddenly detected a comm signal from Spock and McCoy. Scotty immediately took a shuttle to rescue them before Krall's people captured them. Then, McCoy quickly used the medical equipment on Spock. At Krall's base, he looked at Jim's profile and realized that if the artifact wasn't on the ship, Jim must have given pieces to the crew. He went out to intimidate everyone. A girl delivered her piece of the artifact, and he immediately activated the weapon. On the other side, Spock revealed the necklace he had given Uhura had a special compound found only on Vulcan and was easy to track. He hadn't expected it to be useful in this situation. Quickly, they found her position. Unable to beam them out due to jamming signals, they could only infiltrate the base. The plan was to infiltrate the base and access the transmitter, which would help Scotty lock onto the crew and beam them back. At the base, Krall showed Uhura and Sulu the ancient weapon. This weapon had the ability to destroy life. Due to fear of its terrible power, the species that created it had split it apart and scattered it throughout the universe so that no one could use it. Krall had previously found half. The other half was found by the Enterprise crew. Then he locked a crewman in a sealed room and activated the weapon. A black smoke appeared, wrapped around her, causing her to disintegrate. Next, Krall would take the weapon out of the nebula to attack the starbase. Jim and the others were now ready. With Jayla's holograms, multiple images of Jim appeared to distract them. Spock quickly rescued the prisoners, and everyone was beamed out. During the beaming of the last group, Jim appeared, driving the motorcycle and dropping smoke grenades to create cover. Finally, he and Jayla were beamed back to the Franklin. Then they had to pursue Krall and his troops. Krall was entering space and heading for the starbase. The crew immediately took their positions and took off. Despite difficulties during takeoff, the ship still flew, and Sulu piloted it into space. Meanwhile, Krall's swarm burst out of the nebula. The starbase's defensive guns could not block the overwhelming numbers. After that, Spock proposed attacking the swarm. They had to disrupt their formation. Because Spock and McCoy had experience flying captured enemy ships, Scotty beamed the two of them aboard enemy ships. They sought to disrupt them. Boarding a ship, Spock suddenly discovered that they were linked together by a shared signal. Then everything was simple. They just needed to broadcast disruptive music to make them lose cohesion. Then Jim sent the frequency to the starbase to broadcast. The music played, and a chain reaction occurred, causing the enemy ships to lose control and crash into each other. However, the threat remained if Krall could enter the starbase. They still focused on chasing him. Both the Franklin and McCoy ship finally blocked Krall. Jim and the others continued to find Krall. Jim saw that his victims had just been drained of life energy, proving Krall was still alive. Meanwhile, while examining Krall's equipment, Uhura saw the names on the old Franklin crew manifest. Uhura deduced Captain Edison was Krall. It turned out that Edison and his crew were stranded on the planet. Only 3 survived. They had tried to send rescue signals, the Federation did not respond, and they thought the Federation had abandoned them on the planet. Edison also discovered that the native race had left behind advanced drone technology and life-extending technology. However, it distorted Edison's appearance, but Edison still used it and swore to one day take revenge on the Federation. Scotty discovered that if Edison reached the air processing system, it would cause maximum damage. Jim immediately went there. When Edison triggered the weapon, Jim opened an airlock to push Edison and the weapon into space. And Spock also helped him. The battle ended. A few days later, when meeting the Admiral again, this time Jim rejected the promotion because he found his joy in the journey of space exploration, where he belonged. As for Spock, after receiving belongings left by birth,
Older Spock, he saw an image of himself and his future crewmates. Spock realized that this was his destiny. A party later took place. Spock and Jim would never consider leaving Starfleet again. They would join the crew awaiting the rebuilt Enterprise to continue the mission of seeking out new life and civilizations. The movie ended there. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you everyone, and see you again in my next videos.